Hello, Ohayo gozaimasu, and irashaimase to my review of Hana-Bi. I have provisionally popped this review in the series News from Japan on Screen, as I am broadly tying it in with current events. Today, that is Wednesday, May 28th, at time of recording, is a particularly special day in Japan for reasons that I will go into, and that link, albeit a little bit awkwardly and tenuously, with the film that I am concerned with. One of the most significant contemporary Japanese genre films, at least, from one of the most significant contemporary Japanese filmmakers and cultural figures, that is Kitano Takeshi, and the film Hana-Bi. Now, as the title of this book here, written by someone whose work I do not endorse. I know him quite well, and he's a moron. As the title of this book states, Hana-Bi is quite a significant contemporary Japanese film. In fact, it marks in several ways something of a turning point in contemporary Japanese cinema. It's also important for its director, something that I have broadly sketched elsewhere in a review of Brother, a later Kitano film, and which you can find work on in a multitude of sources, in books on Kitano by Aaron Giraud and Kasho Abe, amongst others. So I'm not going to rehearse those here. What I want to do is just sketch something of this film's aesthetic properties in particular, and suggest why it is worth visiting or revisiting on this, as I noted, special day in Japan. So what the hell does this have to do with the news? Why is it newsworthy? And why is this particular day, May 28th, so special? Well, it's not special in and of itself, but it is symbolic. It is the day that sort of launches Japan's summer season of fireworks festivals, which take place throughout June, July and August, up and down the country, and have different meanings, different rites associated with them, different areas of significance. Some are communal, some are intended as celebrations, some are intended as memorials. Indeed, one of the most prominent in Tokyo, the Sumida River Festival, has historical antecedents going back to the Tokugawa era, the Edo period in the 17th and 18th centuries, when there was a great disaster that this festival since has served to commemorate. There are significant festivals in towns like Akita, in Ibaraki and Mie, respectively the Omagiri, the Tsuchiura and the Ise Shrine festivals. And there is a strong sense of both national identity and regional identity encoded in these festivals. The reason they take place in the summer is, or the reasons they take place in the summer are to do with the climate in Japan. The summer is typically very hot, very humid, and the fact that a lot of these festivals take place in large open spaces, often beside rivers, serves to offer a sense of respite from days spent in the heat. They are great sort of opportunities for everyone to get together, much like the still prevalent and still popular sakura or cherry blossom viewing parties in parks across Japan. these festivals are a great excuse for people to get together, to drink, to socialise, and as I've said, to celebrate. And in a country that is often perceived as giving great import to communality, to fitting in with the group, this cannot be sort of discounted as a key reason for these festivals. For these reasons and more, fireworks and the association thereof with the summer months in Japan are particularly significant, particularly important. And I think the fact that May 28th is enshrined as the kind of starting point for this shouldn't pass without comment. Now, something else that I hear you yelling at me is, especially if you know Kitano's film, his Hana-Bi from 1997, what the hell does this have to do with Kitano's film, which in many ways couldn't seem, at least on the surface, more removed from national revelry, communal celebration, and something bright, something gregarious, something intended to mark celebration and commemoration. Well, I think that sense of a discrepancy is at least part ways intended and is part of the reason why you should be watching Hana-Bi and why it has this kind of significance. I've suggested that there is a sense of national identity bound up in fireworks, as well as different regional identities. And I think Kitano's Hana-Bi is important from this point of view because it's the first of his films, or it was the first of his films, that actually could be seen to be set specifically in and around Japan. This is something that the Japanese film scholar Darrell William Davis has written quite instructively about. Kitano's early work, whilst obviously set in Japan, has very little play with any specifics of Japan, its geography, its customs, and indeed its cinematic traditions. It tends to sort of stomp all over notions of the Yakuza film, for instance, in films like Boiling Point or Sonatine. Hana-Bi marks a change, a shift of register, and indeed sees Kitano kind of emerge as quite a Japanese artist, quite self-consciously a Japanese artist. He engages with traditions of cinema, not just Yakuza films, but of the shomingeki or home drama. And indeed, the fact that the film is in part a road movie suggests the extent to which the film visibly sort of encodes, if not quite celebrates, aspects of the Japanese landscape and the Japanese sort of topographical specificity. Hana-Bi, which literally means fireworks, is the story of a detective whose life begins to unravel in various different ways. On the one hand, he has a wife at home who, following the earlier death of their daughter, has been increasingly withdrawn and is apparently now terminally ill. And on the other hand, after a botched stakeout and pursuit of a criminal, he is left with a partner and also a close friend who has become critically injured, indeed crippled. What is particularly intriguing throughout Hana-Bi is the way that this shomingeki, the presence of this intimate, quite moving home drama, provides something of a frame for and a recontextualization of the violent climate, the nihilistic climate of the Yakuza film. It's almost as though Kitano has transposed the characters and stories and set pieces familiar from his earlier films to an entirely different generic context, and there is a very productive tension throughout. The road movie aspect of the film is also grounded in the home drama. So the movement around Japan and through Japan, which is very obviously signified through shots of Mount Fuji, as well as scenes that take place at, for instance, a traditional inn, a ryokan, and in and around a rock garden, are very much signified as pertaining to the fragile state of this marriage, to its potential salvation or recuperation. So the Shomingeki is the sort of animating generic impetus within this film. And I think this is signified quite usefully, quite interestingly, by the aforementioned presence of Mount Fuji. The road movie aspect of the film kicks off with a scene that has predominantly Mount Fuji featured in the background. Indeed, that begins with a long shot of Mount Fuji. And this long shot, for those who know Japanese cinema, looks like nothing so much as the studio logo for Shochiku Studios, the home of Ozu Yasujiro and the unquestioned home of the Shomingeki in Japanese cinema. So there's a very marked sort of intertextual presence of Ozu and the Shomingeki signified in this particular shot. And with this in mind, the violence that we see throughout at least the rest of the film, the second half of the film, takes on something of a different flavour or a different character. In point of fact, the violence in the film, which is quite graphic and stylised, as is typical of Kitano, becomes quite anomalous as the film develops, and the aforementioned scenes featuring a traditional inn, a temple, a shrine, a bell, a rock garden, are all built around comedy, around the kind of physical comedy that Kitano on television had already been, nationally at least, famous for. So there is this constant back and forth, this constant tension between different tones and different genres. And indeed, the violence in the film is increasingly seen to be quite redundant from a narrative point of view. There are several set pieces that serve no narrative ends whatsoever. And indeed, Kitano's violent encounters with the Yakuza gang that are pursuing him lead to almost nothing of value. They don't develop the plot. They don't resolve the plot in any way. They're just there almost as moments of spectacle, moments of quite empty spectacle. And I think this sense of discrepancy and this sense of spectacle is, to come back full circle, where we can begin to think of Hana-Bi as an interesting text to study in light of this sense of national identity and celebration through fireworks. The sense of celebration that is encoded into Japan's fireworks season and its various festivals is, I think, writ large in the film through a celebration of artistry. Although there is a nihilism, there is a sense of moving through life towards death in Hana-Bi. I think the film celebrates that life and celebrates the way that Kitano represents or depicts this life and the celebration thereof. He uses paintings quite a lot in the film. There are lots of cutaways to paintings. Narratively, these are produced by Horibe as part of his recuperation from his life-changing illness or injury. But the paintings are actually Kitano's own. He took up painting himself quite a lot following a near-fatal accident he had in 1994. And his own paintings pepper the film, both through cutaways and as seen on the walls of various buildings and various interior spaces throughout the early part of the film. There are also very stylized moments where, for instance, bloodletting, a shot of blood spurting out of a gunshot wound, is almost graphically matched to red paint being thrown on a canvas. And there are various ways that the pictographic images of kanji characters go to make interesting compositions with regards to what is being painted throughout the film. So there is this constant sense of artistic movement, of artistic expression. And I think this as a frame for the changes being wrought on Kitano's cinema in Hana-Bi, and the fact that he would go on to make very different types of films and, at least for a time, leave the Yakuza film behind. I think there is this sense of recuperation, this sense of almost artistic salvation in the film. And this, on the surface, tenuous link to Fireworks, I think, has this particular link. So it is a film that, albeit strange to say, I think, it is a film that has a celebratory aspect to it. It is a film that is celebrating artistic representation. It's a film that, if not exactly celebrating Japan, at least is very much engaging with Japan, engaging with what Japan means, with its tradition, with its artistic practices. So it's inserting Kitano into a kind of lineage of Japanese artistry, I think. And this really should be celebrated by us, by the viewers. So I think in no uncertain terms, this is about celebrating a filmmaker, and a filmmaker celebrating his art and artistry. The film actually has a title at the beginning saying Takeshi Kitano Volume 7. This was his 7th film, and this title is a way of kind of retrofitting a sort of authorial signature, if you like, as though, a bit like Quentin Tarantino, each film has been a single volume in a developing oeuvre, except none of the earlier 6 films had Takeshi Kitano volumes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6. So this sense of trying almost slyly, almost provokingly, to suggest an authorial canon is part of Kitano's perhaps in-joke here about his own sense of artistry, his own sense of an artistic personality, and the extent to which he is celebrating that on the one hand, but also the discrepancy I talked about at the beginning of the video on the other, the discrepancy between this film and earlier films, and the discrepancy between the apparent nihilistic sense of death and finality that bubbles under the surface of this film, as contrasted with the kind of beautiful, at times placid, contemplative veneer that Kitano literally and figuratively paints over that nihilism. In addition, the fractured a-linear storytelling style and structure of Hana-Bi further suggests discrepancy and disjunction. There is a sense that the film is throwing together, sometimes in a way that is not immediately comprehensible, different time frames. And it's only on repeated viewings, I think, that we understand how this achronology is being filtered through the subjectivity, through the sort of troubled consciousness of Nishi, the protagonist. And this is a further point, as I said, of discrepancy, a further sense in which there are fractures and fissures running throughout this film, but ones that are eternally meaningful and eternally connotative. Ultimately, the fact that this is not just a violent, nihilistic, male sort of death wish writ large as earlier Kitano films were, but it's funny, it's tender, it's moving, it is beautiful in a way that, as I've noted, no earlier Kitano film was, but subsequent Kitano films like Kikujiro and Dolls would certainly be. So it definitely does mark a watershed moment in Kitano's career. It looks backward, it anticipates what is to come, and it's all wrapped up in a very diverse, generic package. If you haven't seen Hana-Bi before, definitely go and seek it out. It is a key film in contemporary Japanese cinema, as well as in Kitano's oeuvre. Comment below, like and subscribe, or do not, see if I care. And I will speak to you soon in the next video.